there are so many executives and leaders that I meet that are stuck in the mud. They've been the same leader for 5, 10, 20 years. And this here, how do you take your own leadership development into your own hands and grow as a leader, develop as a leader? That's why this is such a great topic that I love talking about.
And I would imagine it's an uncomfortable one to look inside at yourself when you actually have to go there with another human being. Like it's hard for any of us to look at ourselves.
It's one of the most difficult things to do if one is truly honest with themselves. They understand there are gaps. Gap, me, Tom Kosnik, there are gaps being a father, a gaps being a business owner, gaps being a husband. It takes Aristotle courage to look into those gaps and do something about it so that I'm not the same husband, father, business owner next year that I was this year.
How often are you talking to leaders in the space that view this stuff as just soft? Soft, hand holding, kumbaya. I've heard people throw mud at the introspection or the self reflection as if it's not pertinent to the business. And in my mind, it couldn't be more relevant to the business.
We on the front end, whether an executive, a business owner, or a CRO or a CFO is going to come into one of our peer groups, we say to them, "Hey, look, there's no lifestyle businesses here in this peer roundtable, and look, if you want to grow your business." If you want to grow your business, you have to grow yourself personally. And a big part of our peer roundtable is leadership development. And what that means is that people are going to ask you questions and make you feel uncomfortable about decisions that you're making, about how you're thinking about employees and customers and the government and politics and all that stuff. And so if you don't have the chutzpah to deal with that, you probably should go find another group. So we address it right on the front end. And I don't know, Dave. I mean, I think that I think people like the challenge, frankly. I mean, if somebody says stuff like that to me, oh, soft this, soft that, this is introspective or navel gazing, I question their assumptions about that and their own development. And I just ask them, hey, who was a leader that you knew that inspired you? Of course, they'll come up with, two or three names of people. And I said, are you the kind of leader you want to be that inspires people that you're leading? And there's usually silence.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the reason I bring it up is it comes up. I've heard it come up before, and I've seen people dump on the concepts, but they're the same people that struggle with conflict. They're the same people who struggle to problem solve with their, peers, and they often let challenges linger for years and years and years because they don't have the skills to navigate them. So the very thing that they're labeling as soft is what's causing them to hide and not deal with what's really going on. That's the reason I asked that question. And a great way to vet people out of the gate. If they're not going to go down that path, they're not a good client for you anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and just real clear, we're not the skill development is, how do I make better decisions? How do I write better memos? How do I communicate better? How do I better solve problems? So those, I mean, one can get those kinds of skill development things in a lot of different ways. But this stuff, Dave, power to see ourselves, we're talking about this is a whole different level. This is my total being and how do I develop as a better Tom Kosnik, a better leader, a better human in the world. This is not, which is another. It's so funny that you mentioned the word skill development, because that's another big misconception that folks have about this kind of a journey or this kind of a development. It's a big deal. I have to clarify that. It seems a lot.
Yeah. So talk to me about young Tom. I know you're a Michigan guy. You tell me about young Tom growing up, parents, school, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I grew up in the Detroit area, less than half a mile from 8 Mile Road. If you know the
Yeah.
if you know the movie and all that, a Polish kid, 100% Polish Catholic, number seven of 10, and I just grew up in a big crazy family with kielbasa and sauerkraut and rye bread, and joined sports when I was a kid, cross country and track, and actually ran a marathon in my senior year of high school, and broke 3 hours.
In your first one? In your first one?
My first one, I broke 3 hours. Yeah, so I was in really good shape back then. But yeah, and large extended family. My dad was one of 13. My mom one of five. And so just a lot of uncles and aunts and cousins, and a lot of big fun family events. Whether they were first communion parties, or whether they were graduation parties, or whether they were weddings, there was always just a lot of fun seeing everybody, and I've got some wonderful relationships with siblings and cousins, and all that. So it was a good place. In Detroit, I know Detroit's got a bad rap. Gosh, I mean, when you think about it, Detroit, the three largest corporations in the world, were all headquartered within 35-40 mile radius from one another.
Right. And it's making a comeback, right? I mean, I know the
Yeah.
restaurants are coming back and it's stabilizing to some extent.
No, yeah, yeah. Detroit's a big comeback. We with all the activity on the West Coast, somebody sent me an article where Detroit has become a more desirable place to visit than San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, San Diego.
Yep.
They're actually there's all kinds of stuff going on in the Detroit area with conventions and art. And in fact, there's things that have happened there that I have to go find out. There's this street art where they paint the whole building. And my wife, she lived in France for a couple of years, and so we've got some friends over there. But they came to the States to visit, and they did this like weekend trip to Detroit to see the art.
I saw something on that. It's very cool. It's not considered graffiti. It's actually part of the fabric of.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then there were a bunch of artists from New York that left New York, moved to the Detroit area to start an artist community. And basically, they could buy a whole floor of a building and turn it into a living slash art studio. And so now there's this whole art community that's in the Detroit, living in the Detroit area, creating art and things like that. So and look, man, you're out of Boston, so you gotta love Dan Campbell and what he's done for the Lions.
I give that guy credit. He's put the Lions finally back on the map. Yesterday was tough, though. That's a big loss.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. Hey, get it out of the way. Get it out of the way early. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And
But, but you're in Chicago right now, correct?
I've been in Chicago for gosh, just over 30 years now.
So huge family, lots of connections, runner, athlete, Polish background. When you first got out of school, what is it that you did? What was the first step in your career?
I got an undergraduate degree in psychology and philosophy from Seattle University, and then I worked for a couple of years, and then I went into the seminary. So I was on track for ordained ministry in the Catholic Church, and then somewhere three-quarters way through, I realized that the calling was not for ordained ministry. But I was too close to finishing my Master's of Divinity, so I went ahead and finished, and there were all these new jobs that were popping up in a church at the time. But anyway, around the time that I graduated, I met my wife to be, who I happen to call Saint Catherine. My kids call her Saint Catherine too, just putting up with all my craziness. And then I worked for the church in the northwest suburbs of the Chicagoland area. Lake Zurich was the area, and did that for a couple of years, and then realized that, gosh, this is going to be a tough road to hold, trying to send kids to college and pay for kids. And so then I got into doing what I'm doing now, which is the organizational development and the peer roundtables and working with business owners and C-suite executives, and never looked back. All those Dave, all those transferable skills.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, with a psychology background, the time in the church, I would assume that a lot of what you learned and experienced translated right into what you're doing. So you went from that right into organizational development.
Well, I did, yeah, and then I worked in OD for a couple of years, and then wanted to get formal training, and that's when I went back, executive master's, Bowling Green State University, and got a, master's in organizational development. On the business side, if you want us to help you solve some business problems and help you get your business up and growing, we can do that. And if you need to go to confession at some point, we can take care of that too. We had the 50% of it is the peer roundtable program that we sponsor, and the other 50% of it is the organizational development, which again could be business planning, sales planning, financial analysis, some interim sales management work that we do, compensation analysis, compensation redesign, and just all that change management. As we started out with, right? If you want to grow your business, you've got to change. If I want to grow my business, I've got to change. So just helping those senior leaders, where do they have to change in order to yeah, in order to see growth in their business.
I would assume that a lot of these people, depending on how they grew up in the business, they got there because they were good at something. Maybe, maybe they were good at sales or good at recruiting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Well, oh gosh, our CFOs and CROs and CMOs, I mean, they're all very talented people. And then the people that own the business, they're doing something right. I mean, if they've been able to launch a business and then keep it going and growing and hiring people and obtaining clients, they're doing something right. And to even the small ones that grow it up to a certain size, how many people actually take the risk of opening up their own business, the financial risk, borrowing money or not taking a salary for a year and a half, whatever it takes to get that business up and running off the ground. And I want to say they authentically care about their internal employees. They really want their internal employees. I know we read all this stuff, we hear this stuff on the media, but and I truly believe that most small businesses that I run into, the people that own those businesses authentically care about the people that are working in the business. They
Mhm.
want to see them advance economically. They want to see them advanced in their own development, and it's just great to be a part of that story, that narrative, to help somebody do that, help somebody, solve problems and get the business growing. And
If you're doing a really good job, I would think that you're actually changing their life. It's not just them as a professional. You actually can give them skills that they can apply outside of work and live outside of work. That's what I think of when I think of this kind of skill set or this kind of awareness, is you improve the quality of all of their relationships by teaching them how to navigate their own personality and their
oh
own
my gosh,
existence.
I have so many stories.
I know that there was an article you read and you actually shared it with me from 1962, The Power to See Ourselves, that still is relevant today as it was back then, as you aptly said. At what point did you say, you know what, this is something that's just going to be core to my business?
When the same problem keeps emerging in the business, at some point you say, okay, what's the common denominator? Back to honesty and courage. It's okay. I've got to be doing something wrong. Taking a step back and just understanding the filters that I see and experience the world in, and recognizing that there are people that have very different kind of filters that are just as valid and reliable as my filters. And my filters could be my sex. I'm 63-year-old white male, grown up in the Midwest, a big family, my married, husband, father, small business owner. Those are so these my culture, talking about being, I'm Polish, first thing about understanding who one is just to understand all those filters that I see, I experience, I view the world around me in. Dave, you probably remember when you were young, there's this whole thing about self-concept, right? Usually high school or in college, oh, what's my self-concept? The reality is that we don't have one self-concept, we have many self-concepts. I've got a self-concept as myself as a business owner, I have a self-concept as myself as a father, I have a self-concept of myself as a community member. And those filters that I talked about influence my self concept. I've run 30 marathons in my day. So, concept, 6 Bostons, by the way, but my concept is, hey, I'm a good runner. I mean, I know how to do this. I can do this. I'm confident in it, right?
Yep.
Versus playing basketball. I'm not very confident in, in my skills as a basketball player,
Yeah.
at 5'9" and 100 and, whatever I am these days.
Yeah.
But understanding oneself is understanding the filters and then understanding myself, my self concepts and what those self concepts are. We're obviously the power to see ourselves is about developing in the mature leadership.
Yeah.
uh, and there's two things. One, and you talked about it earlier, is just understanding where the gaps are
Yeah.
between the filters and the self concepts, but then overcoming the resistance. My kids sometimes are hesitant to come tell me bad news. And I said, well, why are you upset? Why are you hesitant to tell me bad news? And uh, because Dad, we don't want to put up with a blow up.
Right.
And like mom doesn't blow up. Mom's way of dealing with things, she internalizes it, and then but like it just comes out. And so that's a overcoming resistance. That's a piece of me that I've been trying to work on, is that, oh, okay, well, let's come up with a guideline, and let's come up with a way to communicate. Or I think what we said was, Dad, I'm catching the train. I'm going to catch the brown line in 7 minutes, and I'm
Yeah.
walking out the door in two, but I have something I got to tell you. I said, that's just a clue for me to, okay, just listen, don't say anything, just listen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's out of Dave. That's a piece that I've been working on, is somebody cuts me off on the road, like, rah, 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 rah. Somebody does something, whatever. I'd see something come over the news feed. And so I've been working on, gosh, how can I not be so reactive to that kind of stuff that's coming at me? Overcoming the resistance, right? To make that change is a big thing, and understanding who we are.
When you say overcoming the resistance, you're talking about your own resistance to it, correct?
Oh, sure, yeah, because we have certain assumptions. I have assumptions about, look, I mean, I live in Chicago. I mean, just we could spend 3 hours talking about the politics. And so I have a certain assumptions about the political leaders in the Chicagoland area,
Sure.
and they're not good assumptions.
Right.
Whether they're valid or not valid, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we like to hang on to the way that we see the world.
Sure.
And I've got to realize that, gosh, if I'm a Hispanic worker, if I'm an African American worker from the South Side, if I'm an immigrant, if I'm a Jewish guy versus a Catholic, how do they, be opening myself up, say, well, how do they experience the political milieu of Chicago or the politicians? Do they see them as a help? Do they see them as a hindrance? Do they see them as uh, and those are the questions that you have to start, opening yourself up to and reflecting on, and seeing the world from another perspective, which just simply helps you to question the assumptions that you have about all that stuff that you never really talk about. You never get it out on a table. You never talk about it. All you do is, 100% of the time, you're talking and I'm thinking what I'm going to say about Dave's lament about how bad the Patriots are going to be this year. I'm thinking about I, whether it's the Patriots, whether it's politics, whether it's the economy. I'm not listening to you thinking, gosh, I wonder if I was born in Boston and I was a Patriots fan. And by the way, if it wasn't, well, anyway, if it wasn't for the great program at the University of Michigan, delivered Tom Brady to you guys.
I'm going to give you the credit, Tom. It's interesting to hear what you're describing. So you kind of this understanding who you are. There's three concepts you talk about: your own filter, your self concept, and your ability to overcome the resistance. It's funny because if you start a company and you're responsible for other people and you don't have that awareness, that's ultimately where your problems
Oh
start
my gosh, how often have you run into and you say to them, boy, that guy has little to no self-awareness.
all the time.
Oh, he's a bull in a china shop. Oh, she's a bully. Who wants to be around those people?
Well, let me comment in this regard. What I'll see a lot is people. You mentioned earlier. There's a lot of good people who have started these companies. That it took courage to do it. They had talent. They worked
Yes.
hard. All of a
Yes.
sudden, you got a company, and that applies to all industries. It's not just this.
Yes.
Every
Totally. Yeah.
so I have the fortune of working with different kinds of people. I'm like, wow, that took a lot of guts, and many of them weren't schooled on how to do it, but somehow did it. Good people, they care about their employees. They hire people because they need their help. Two, they want to see them become successful, and they want to impact their lives. There's no question about that. But where things go wrong oftentimes is they're not able to see beyond their self-concept. They make assumptions about what other people should do, should say, how they should act, how they should think. They also make assumptions that they're going to copy them. You're gonna be like me, and that my way is the way. So it's just kind of interesting to hear you say that because in my mind, who you think you are is very temporary. If I went back 10 years, 5 years, and you asked me what I thought of me, my answers 5 years ago would have been similar, but not entirely the same.
Yeah.
Go back
Yeah.
10 years. If you go back 30 years, I'd be embarrassed by what I was saying. But I was
Yes.
still the same person
Yeah.
evolving. So how much do you think about that? I would assume that the resistance it's healthy, and if you can get through it, that equals growth. A lot of people, I would think, meet the resistance and go into depression, or they go into lockdown mode. When they start to feel uncomfortable, they double down on the same, right?
Yeah, think about the resistance to change, right? So if I am one of those managers, if I'm one of those managers that are typically scoring a C from my employees on my management abilities, and oh, Tom makes terrible decisions, Tom doesn't think strategically, Tom doesn't listen that well. I mean, these are, and you can take courses and things like that to try to learn to be a better communicator, learn to be a better listener. But look, I mean, where the real change is had is that I see the world differently. I behave differently. It's digging into, okay, I need to change my style on, I need to change the way I'm communicating. I need to understand this relationship. There's meaning that I have to behave differently. In order to behave differently, I have to think about it differently. To think about it differently, I've got to change my assumptions about whatever it is, the employee manager relationship, change my assumptions about how conflict gets settled. I mean, if I grew up, think about, just real quick, think about if I grew up in a family where it was where there was a lot of conflict between mom and dad, a lot of conflict between siblings, a lot of conflict between neighbors, and conflict was just, and it was bad conflict, not like nothing that ever got resolved or nothing that ever moved a dime, or it just was like it just got people more. so then I become a manager, right? I get out of that environment. I go get a college degree. I get a job. I work hard. I become a manager. If I never question that filter, then I approach every conflict situation as an assault. So then you gotta dig back to understand the filter, understand the assumptions that you have about how to resolve conflict. It's not, oh, Tom, we're going to send you to a class and you're going to learn. It's not an intellectual thing. And it's not just a straight, understanding or a mind thing. It truly is. You change your assumptions about it, which changes your thinking about it, which makes you see it differently. Then the behavior is a result. The behavior change is a result of that. And then all of a sudden, gosh, I mean, I have then my new filter, right? This is the development. This is moving into a much more mature level of leadership. I can resolve conflict in a whole new way that I never envisioned I could resolve that conflict. That's what we're talking about here. That's why this stuff is so powerful.
What about the perception of authority from the leadership standpoint? Anybody in a management role or an executive level role, how does their perception of authority impact the organization? And how does the organization's perception of authority, or what it is or isn't, impact that communication between staff and executive?
They top down, the senior leader, and what are their filters on what authority is, and bottom up, and in management. Oh my gosh, I do have friends in the organizational development world that would disagree with what I'm about to say, but you meet these owners that you and we just scratch our heads and say, how do they keep employees for more than a few months? I mean, they're terrible people. They cuss at their employees. They treat them badly. They pay them poorly. And my belief is that employees that come from environments like that, where they've been treated poorly and beat up and cussed at and all that, that's what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. So then they're attracted to those kinds of environments
Mm.
where, if your dad, taught you how to golf and taught you how to fish, and may have been knew how to discipline when discipline needed to be, but didn't, go overboard, and that sort of thing. Then you're going to be attracted to a leader that is more of a mentor, or more of somebody that you look up to, and that's exactly and when you're on the outside, when you're like a consultant on the outside and you see stuff happening, I mean, it's so clear. But yet the people that are inside the fishbowl, they have no idea what's happening.
No, no. In my experience, I see less of the tyrant yelling and screaming. I've seen a few of those, don't get me wrong, I have. I see more of indirect, passive aggressive leadership
Yeah, yeah,
tendencies
yeah, right.
that
Yeah.
they're trying to empower, and in the meantime they're cutting themselves out at the knees, and they're disrupting trust in the organization because of the manner in which they're choosing to communicate whatever decisions or
Trust is how do you build an organization if you don't have trust?
you can't.
Trust is another one of the filters that if you want to develop as how many, oh my gosh, I mean, I was just talking about this with a coworker of mine that with a client of ours that has a senior level person, and I'm like, this senior level person, he has an inability to trust the organization. I
That's
mean, there's no way that guy is going to survive in that company. He's just not going to last,
no,
because you can't grow a sales team if you can't trust that I'm going to educate and train my salespeople, and I'm going to give them a call list, and they're going to go out and they're going to do their job. Oh my gosh, I mean, this is like the basics. But trust is another one of those key leadership qualities that you got to put underneath the microscope, and just reflect back, what are my assumptions about trust? Like, do I really trust people? Do I not trust people? Like, when do I not trust? When do I do trust? When am I questioning trust? And do I understand trust from the other side of the table?
Right,
I don't know
right.
if I'm making, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
How did you get on this Zoom with me, Tom? I don't know what you're talking about. No, no, it is making sense to me. You know, when you think about trust, I think people unintentionally destroy it. They have no idea that what they're doing is completely undermining the relationship. For example, if I let you come to me on a recurring basis to complain about one of your colleagues, me allowing you to do that is a major problem. And then me
correct.
deciding to say
Yeah,
something on your behalf, for example, is
correct.
a major problem. I've seen
Correct.
executives hide behind their smiles. They're getting feedback from anybody that will come into their office and tell them, and then they go act on that feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely toxic.
No, totally, totally, totally. Yeah,
But
totally.
you're also teaching people that it's okay to sell each other out. That's not to say that a person can't have a challenge with another person, but I just took on a few new clients over the last month. None of them are staffing clients. In every single case, I've spoken to the leadership team saying, don't ever allow anybody to come to you to complain about somebody else
Yeah.
unless they have an idea on how to fix it. Do not participate in that conversation and don't allow that to be okay. You
Yeah.
teach them how to
Right.
navigate their problems and never solve it on their behalf. Those are problems I see everywhere. Unintentional problems. There are really good executives who think, "Hey, I'll take care of this." They think they're doing the right thing. I'll
Yeah.
listen to you.
Yeah.
I'll take care of this, not understanding the consequences. So, what do you say to that?
Yeah. I see it often as well. My question to those executives, why are you doing that? Why are you allowing that? Why are you doing that? And let's put that under the microscope. I mean, have you seen that in other workplaces? Have you personally went, around and complained? Uh, yeah. So you have to use those moments. You have to use those moments as opportunities to then make somebody uncomfortable so that you can encourage them to grow. I say to folks, hey, look, I get hired a lot, fired a lot, and rehired a lot. That's,
Fired during the uncomfortable phase?
yeah, because you're saying things, you're putting pressure on them, right? You're putting pressure on them. I had a client one time that he said, Tom, I feel like I'm a piece of marble. And that when I get into a conversation with you, you're the guy, the artist with the chisel and the hammer, and you're just chiseling and hammering away.
Let me ask you this: the other part to this, I know that there's the whole self-awareness piece, and then you get into you finally recognize that what you're doing or who you think you are isn't quite working. With all the best intentions, you're building a company, you think it should be working a certain way, and it's not. So you have to recognize it in order to envision something else, right?
Yes,
You
yes.
can't become anything else until you kind of admit I'm an alcoholic. I realize now that I drink too much and I have an alcohol problem and I'm willing to admit it. Isn't that kind of what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, and I think you're asking about the moving from understanding who one is to starting to envision what one wants to become. And we've been talking a little bit about this, but self-examination of gosh, this is where I'm at right now. I'll use my example. I'm tired of blowing up at my kids when they give me bad news. I really want to not have them experience me in that way. And then the whole setting self expectations that hey, like this, I want to be in this area of my dad being a father, I want to change this behavior
Yeah,
so that when I hear bad news, so in order to change that behavior, I've got to think about it differently. I've got to see it differently. I got to dig out the assumptions about receiving bad news. And then just, understanding, well, setting a setting a new expectation for myself,
yeah,
right? Setting a new, whether it's setting a new goal, setting a new expectation of how I want to be in these moments. I no longer like that stuff. I used to say Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned that, hey, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, some, way back when I was, I used to tell people, hey, I just tell it like it is. I mean, how many times have you heard that?
So, yep,
Oh, people, I just tell it like it is. Some people can handle it, some people can't. That's their problem. It's, well, I just want to be a more compassionate, person when folks are telling me whatever, especially with my kids. So, but that's that whole piece of envisioning what I want to become. Not only do I need to put all that stuff that we've been talking about under the microscope, which takes a lot of honesty. I got to be honest with myself, right? I don't know about you, but like when my wife tells me something that I don't want to hear, uh, the first thing is grumbling, grumbling, mashing of the teeth. And, my kids tell me something I don't want to hear, like, I just, uh, a few days later, a week later, 5 days later, at some point I'll go out for a long run, not a 20 miler. A long run now used to be a 20 miler. But anyway, but at some point I'll get in a certain quietness and then I'll realize, there's a kernel of truth, in what Kate's saying. There's a kernel of truth in what Emma's saying. And I need to put that under the microscope. So that self-examination piece, it takes courage.
yeah,
It takes honesty. We're not talking about easy stuff here. And it may be, Dave, it may be, gosh, I'm gonna go talk to my friend Greg. And I'm gonna ask Greg, hey, like, do you see this in me? How do you experience this? How do I, but I got to go to somebody, I got to, well, and Greg is, my friend Greg is fantastic. I could, he and I, yeah, I could ask him questions like that and know he's going to straight shoot me back.
yep,
He's not going to, he's going to be, it may be a peer group,
yeah,
even more challenging. Like if I'm in a peer group and I say, guys, like I feel like I'm not making the right decisions, am I? Am I not? Like what do you guys see? Do
sure,
you guys see me making good decisions in my business? That takes kahunas,
yeah,
it's to be able to do that. So that self-examination, that's all part of self-examination, is asking oneself, being open, being honest, being courageous with yourself, and then asking other folks around you to either, validate or maybe shed more light on, hey, Tom, dot, 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 this, and this, and here's what I see. All that stuff is, and then, hey, setting expectations and setting self expectations and setting the fact that, yes, I do want to change. You use the example of alcoholism, and somebody's finally saying, hey, I drink too much. All right, you know, I'm going to make a change,
yep,
and this is what I'm talking about is different than somebody that, wakes up one morning and says, well, I'm going to quit smoking today, and they stop smoking, and off they go. I mean, okay, they quit smoking, but do they really understand like the change? Did they really go through any kind of this process that we're talking about? Because look, I mean, in management and in leadership, it's all about it's all the people stuff. How do I communicate? How do I lead? How do I resolve conflict? How do I, manage the scenarios? We're in a downturn right now. How do I present myself as a leader in the midst of a downturn, when, we've got chunks of revenue that are falling off, things like that.
I was listening to some interview last week or whatever, and my conclusion at the end of the interview was, you really can't know anybody that doesn't know themselves. And I believe that. Like if you don't know who you are, we're always going to have a conflict because you're likely going to be pretending from time to time. in the relationship. And this applies to managers and executives and employees alike, where in certain situations you start to cover up, hold back, brag, whatever your default is under pressure. And in those moments, you're not being real. And the hardest thing to do is be candid with somebody who can't acknowledge or doesn't see who they really are. There's no better place to be though with a person that can openly say, I'm an asshole and I hate being an asshole. Like, but pardon my language, but if I was one, and from time to time I can be, but if I am being that way and I can see it and say it first, it creates space for you to say, he sees it. Okay,
Yeah.
he gets it. And then it's easier for us to talk. And I could say, Tom, I don't want to be that way anymore. And I need you to hold me accountable. We have to find a way to get to a better place. I don't know if I can get there with you right now based on the way I've been treating you. But whether it's being that way, or I could say something to the effect of, Tom, you're my best player here. You know that. And you know that I'm ignoring a bunch of dysfunction over here. How do you come here every day and look me in the face with respect? Because if I were you, I wouldn't respect me. It's that creates relief for your A player. If you have a poor performer or an attitude problem, it's acknowledging, I've been reluctant to confront this because I don't want to have an argument with you, but right now what you're doing isn't working for me or anybody else here. And it's acknowledging what everyone else sees.
Yeah.
And so like part of it is just letting yourself off the hook to stop pretending because everybody can see you're pretending.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And the just a quick note to, go back 35 minutes here, 30 minutes in our conversation. This is overcoming the resistance to change,
Yeah.
right? Because the guy who is performing as an a-hole in the business, do they, and why is that and all that stuff? But I mean, do they really want to change?
Right.
Do they really want to be a different kind of a leader in that business? And for most of us, me included, change is tough. This change in behavior is a challenging thing. It's
So say you have somebody who's doubling down and they admit it. No, this is who I am. I am who I am. Deal with it. And then there's the other side where somebody might put it on the table like you with the peer group and say, here's the challenge I'm getting. And then they defend it. They don't want to be called that. They don't want to be known as that, but they're still justifying the approach. And they want you to say, you're not really a bad guy, Tom, even though you're behaving that way. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what's worse, the person who is just hoping you take them off the hook, or the person that doubles down and says, that's just the way I am, deal with it.
you are in charge of whether you put the brakes on or you put the gas on.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. The power to see ourselves. We're not talking about like constantly doing the self-examination or constantly doing the navel gazing or constantly. No, we're talking about I've got some bad habits. I do things that have a dilatory effect on other people, and I don't like that anymore. I mean, use my example of blowing up when my kids tell me bad news. I don't like the ongoing negative effect that has on my kids or my wife. And I want to change that.
I had a friend call me last week. He's always looking for free advice. Not always, but when he calls, he's looking for free advice. And all I do is show him a mirror over and over again because he doesn't want it to be about him. So no answers, just whatever. But what do you do with people that constantly view the employee, a leader? What do you do with a leader that constantly views the employee as the problem, or it's never them? So you mentioned earlier there is one common denominator in a dysfunctional company or a company that
Sure,
lacks
yeah.
trust. How do you? I deal with this all the time, and with me, I say right out of the gate, well, you're still here. You're the common denominator. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who these people are, who those people were, who's come and gone. You're still here. You've created this culture. You've enabled it. You've allowed it, and you'll either perpetuate it or you'll change. It's up to you. So how do what's your take on that, and how do you handle a personality like that?
It's so funny that the reason why had access to this article, a guy by the name of Vic Heckler, who was tied into the Center for Creative Leadership. He sat on the board of the Center for Creative Leadership. He was based out of Chicago. He lives in Florida now. I'd still talk to him every now and then. But Vic did succession planning with big companies. Very, very talented, PhD, published, all that stuff. And wonderful, wonderful, wonderful mentor and individual. But I said, Vic, I've got this problem. Um, I get a client, and the client says to me, I want to grow my business. And I say to them, okay, do you have a roadmap to grow your business? And they say, no. Hmm. Do you have a financial plan to back any kind of decisions you're making to grow your business? No, no, we don't budget here. Um, Well, tell me about your how you hire the senior managers that are responsible for either growing geographies or offices or whatever. Oh, I've got some friends that are working for me. I've got some family working for me. We
Friends and
we
family.
we we,
Friends
we
and
really
family.
we don't have any. I said, okay, well, if you want to grow your business, I say to them, if you want to grow your business, then you really need a roadmap. You need a business, and we call that a business plan. You need a financial model so that with metrics, so that if I invest $500,000 in the Tampa market, that in 18 months from now, I'm going to get that half a million back. And then starting at 18, I'm going to start making money in that office, dot, 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 dot.
Hmm.
And you're going to have you're going to have to professionalize. I've had to learn to use language that you have to professionalize your management, meaning that you're going to have to get a hiring process in place. You're going to have job profiles and performance metrics. And well, shit, I've gotten this business to 15 million in revenue, just running it out of my back pocket. Are you telling me that to grow my business, I have to have a business plan and a financial plan and a hiring process? And I say, yes, if you want to grow your business, you've got to you now have grown it to the top of the owner operator, and you won't be able to grow it past it. You have to put structure in place, on and on and on. So I said to my colleague Vic, I said, Vic, these guys, all of a sudden I become the problem. Like they come to me asking for advice. I quickly size it up. Sometimes I do an assessment on the front end. I tell them what they need to do, and then they turn it around and say, well, hell, Tom's never run a manufacturing business. Tom's never run a restaurant. No, what does he know about this? And off they go. And so Vic said, hey, he said, first off, you've got to read The Power to See Ourselves, Tom. This is true story I'm telling you, Dave. You got to read The Power to See Ourselves. And he said the other thing is that, and he's the one that really kind of drilled home to me that in order for somebody to grow their business, that they have to grow, they've got to change. But he he said, you can't put yourself on the other side of the table. What you have to do is you have to find other people that they can identify with themselves, that from their seat they can say to the individual, you want to grow your business, you need a business plan, you need a roadmap. Otherwise, you have no plan, you plan to fail. And that's where the whole peer roundtable program came in. And so there's a lot of times people call me up to do organizational development consulting, and I
Hmm.
say to them, you don't need me to help you build a business plan. You need to get into my peer roundtable program,
Yep.
and here share the best practices from these other business owners that are growing their business. You get an individual like that. What I have found is that I can give them books to read, which they never read, literally. I can tell them what they need to do, which they're not, most of the times they're not going to listen to it. Uh, and why don't they listen to it? They don't listen to it because of all this stuff we're talking about. They have assumptions about what a consultant is,
Yep.
outside advisor.
Yeah.
And that whatever I'm saying is going through that filter of theirs, and they're interpreting it, understanding it, seeing it, and then behaving to it in a certain way. And so for me, what I've done, and I've done this, I don't know, successfully, I don't know how many times, Dave, where we're in I put a proposal together, but I say to the prospect, I want to get you on two conference calls before I send you my proposal. I want to get you connected to another person on the other side of the country so they feel safe and they're not competitors who successfully grew their business from 15 to 50 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And just to get you connected with other people in your same shoes, I'll get those calls set up. And usually the prospect will say to me, really? Like you've got a client that would meet with me on the phone for an hour and talk about how they grew their business? And I say, yes, yes, that's our peer roundtable program. That's what we do. We help each other grow the business. And so then what I do is now I've got it's not Tom Kosnik, who's never run this kind of a business, telling the prospect, hey, you've got to do this, got to do that. Uh, you've got this guy who has successfully done it to say, oh yeah, I remember I was in your shoes for 10 years and
Mhm.
frustrated for 10 years. And then finally I decided, hey, I need to hire somebody to help me figure this out. And then we put a business plan together, which we never did before. We put a financial model together, which we never did before. We hired somebody, an HR firm, to help us put a hiring process in, and my turnover rates went down and my retention rates went up. And I hired another consultant to help me with engagement, employee engagement. And I stopped doing this and started doing that, that, and that. And that's how I do it is I try to find people that they can I try to find people I can connect them with, network them with, that they can see themselves in this individual. Mimetic desire. I don't know if you've ever read the book Wanting. That's another read there.
Hmm.
That's your homework assignment as part
All
of
right.
the
Say that
podcast.
again. Hey, what's it called?
Wanting.
Wanting.
Uh yeah, mimetic desire. So you get them connected with somebody who they can see and say, I want to imitate what that man or what that woman did.
It's interesting to hear you say this, and I can relate to a lot of these challenges. And what I've done over the last few years is attached myself to upsides. So I tell them right out of the gate, I'm not engaging unless we can track and measure growth and
Uh,
performance. And I want a piece of that. And so the bigger and more sophisticated companies will say we're in. And so there's a fee associated with the ongoing work,
sure.
but it's
Yeah.
attached to all these things you're talking about.
Success fee. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly right. Because I'm not interested. The older I get and the more I learn, I just I don't have time for people that are playing around. The other thing that and it's so deceiving. You could have a $15 million company based around one account and think you're a hero. You're one
Yeah.
account. You,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
build a
Yeah.
$30 million company with two or three accounts. So the perception of revenue and what it means is so misleading. It really is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is how what's the depth of what's the depth of performance on that team? How many people are producing? What if that one person went away? What if that one client went away? So it goes beyond. Everybody's situation is so different, and I'm sure you see that as you get into these companies.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, they still have done something right and they're still making good money. They're still creating
Yeah.
wealth and all that stuff. But if they want to get to, from where they're at, wherever that is, to a more professionally managed organization or an organization that's twice the size or three times the size, then they'll have to change.
Let me wrap this up and then you put a bow on it. So we talked about the need, why it's so important to understand yourself, why it's also important to understand where you want to go, and then creating a roadmap to get there. Those are the three basic concepts that we kind of batted around today. Is there anything that we didn't cover or a comment that you want to make to potentially bring this discussion into a place where people kind of get it?
Yeah, I just I would say the whole thing of the article, The Power to See Ourselves, is really, and he uses the language is a little dated, but he uses, becoming growing into a mature leadership. So, of course, we, in polarities, we think immature versus mature. But really, he talks about this whole self-realization power, and that is where growing from things just happening to me in the business world, things just happening to me in my work environment, to I'm taking charge here. I'm putting a roadmap together for my own development. uh I'm trying to understand my intrinsic values, my intrinsic motivations, my intrinsic goals. I'm refining those to get them more clear. But then I'm going to realize I'm going to take control here. I'm the guy that in these kinds of meetings, I'm tired of being the a-hole in these kinds of meetings. I'm tired of seeing this turnover rate. I'm tired of seeing, what would these same issues come up again and again and again. Key is not looking at the organization, but looking at yourself as a leader. And but that whole self-realization power, like you take and I don't want to use the word control, because we're not talking about control. We're
Yeah,
talking about being self-directed, and we're talking about being in charge.
yeah,
I'm being self-directed, I'm being in charge, and I'm being less reactive, and I'm being predominantly proactive with my development of who I want to be, not only in work, but as a father, as a husband, as a mom, as a wife, as a neighbor, as a Patriots fan.
yep,
uh,
yep. That's one of them. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
good. This is good. I think this is good stuff, Dave. I mean, this is where it's at, man. This is where it's at. This is how people grow businesses. This is how people grow businesses. Because look, businesses are made of people, and and it's about growing people as well. And I've got tons of great stories of leaders that continuously are growing, but also know how to create organizations where people in their organizations are growing and developing. And it just doesn't get better than that.
No, it doesn't. Somebody used the term recently. I was talking to somebody and they used the term emotional regulation. And the
Mm.
most successful leaders are able to regulate their emotions. And I got to thinking how important it is to surround yourself, not just in business, but in life, with people that won't accept or tolerate your emotional dysregulation. So when I'm not at my best, I need to be around people that put me in my place, whether it's my kids or my wife or
Yeah.
my friends or my
Yes.
employees. And if,
Yes.
and if I'm not around, if I'm not putting those types of people in my life, I'm doing myself and everyone else a disservice.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. Yeah. Wicked. There's so many things popping up
I
into my
know,
head.
I know, I know. And we've blown through the time. Tom, I appreciate your time. I enjoyed this episode, and I'm sure we'll do it again. I'm sure there's other things we could be talking about going forward.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for the invitation and listening to me.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Tom.